Throughout the 20th century, Pan American World Airways was a dominant force in aviation. Pan Am was the reigning airline from the 1930s on, being the first company to successfully execute the first commercial transatlantic flight. After this, the company only grew, chauffeuring many similar flights and becoming a great commercial aviation power. But how did this prominent airline become so successful? Even though Pan American's origins cannot be traced to Port Washington, New York, the strategic location of Manhasset Bay helped Pan Am soar to new heights never seen before. Manhasset Bay was a protected inlet, yet still had clear access to the Long Island Sound, which was crucial for developing transatlantic flight. Aviation already had a presence in Port Washington, with numerous flying clubs and experimentations with flight taking place there. These factors all contributed to Port Washington's role in building up what would become one of the most successful airlines of the 20th century. Pan American's desire to offer transatlantic flight stemmed from their basic origins as a small-scale courier service. Pan Am's humble start began in the sunny paradise of Key West, Florida, where in 1927 a small passenger air service between Key West and Havana, Cuba, was founded. The company's leader and founder, Juan Trippi, as well as other leaders of the company, intended to use Pan Am just to shuttle passengers between Miami and Havana, where many Floridians owned businesses. This business model would prove to be very fruitful for the company. This small-scale operation would become very successful, with flights selling out between the locations for months on end. The success of their few routes propelled Pan Am to create new routes and add more planes to the existing Miami route in order to keep up with demand and expand their reach to other locations where business would prosper. Within 2 years, Pan Am's routes would extend from Miami to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and even to Texas. These international routes were different from the mostly regional flights carried by competition such as United Airlines, which offered smaller and more local routes. United Airlines and others would only fly minimal lengths throughout small portions of America. Even with these distances covered, growth of Pan Am was limited without the development of a long-distance plane. Pan Am could not expand beyond the Americas unless a plan was developed to combat the long journey across the Atlantic. However, if accomplished, it would set Pan Am apart from all other airlines at the time. Pan Am was looking to expand their company by the early 1920s, and to do this, they needed to look beyond the realm of the Americas. The founder of Pan Am, Juan Trippi, saw transatlantic flight as an option for Pan Am's future, noting,
"It has within a single decade swept away forever the age-old barriers of time and distance between this nation and its neighboring republics and the lands beyond the seas. It has already proved itself a vital force for the protection and extension of this nation's world commerce."
Trippi recognized that this type of flight would not only aid in relationships and trading between nations, it would give Pan Am an edge over its competitors. With his leadership, Pan Am would be at the forefront of new ideas and innovation, mainly through transatlantic travel. At this time, there was no airline that could execute transatlantic commercial aviation. The only transatlantic flights were flown by skilled pilots like Charles Lindbergh. The long and tiring journey made it extremely difficult for the average commercial plane and pilot, but if Pan Am was able to offer this first, it would be at a major advantage over the travel industry. To accomplish transatlantic flight, a strategic location was needed as well. It had to be a location that had close proximity to the Atlantic Ocean, as well as people that would engage and benefit from this new form of transportation. There was one location in particular that came to mind with the desired specifications: Port Washington, New York, a small town situated on Manhasset Bay. There were several reasons why Port Washington was an ideal location for a base. Situated on the bay, it had already been a site of seaplane innovation prior to Pan Am's arrival, with people learning and experimenting with the art of flying in the late 1910s and early 1920s. One such person was Caleb Bragg, a race car driver and aviator who set a hydro-aeroplane record of 14,200 feet after taking off from Manhasset Bay. Bragg had spent much time in Port Washington developing an early prototype for a seaplane, demonstrating his work in flight. 2 years later, in 1919, Bragg set another record for seaplanes by flying at 19,100 feet over the Port Washington Bay Area. The bay also housed several aviation clubs, and participants included prominent family members of the Guggenheim and Vanderbilt families, who all resided in Port Washington during the summer months. The clubs would attempt to experiment with the art of flying, building simple gliders towed behind speedboats. The research and construction of these planes were in part financed by the aristocrats of Port Washington. All of these early accomplishments led to Manhasset Bay being known as the Plymouth Rock of aviation. Port Washington's involvement with the growing aviation industry further increased in the late 1920s when the American Aeronautical Corporation purchased land along Manhasset Bay to build the Port Washington Seaplane Base. The purpose of the base was to manufacture Savoia Marchetti S-56 seaplanes. The planes were of Italian design, and the purchase was even approved by Italy's dictator Benito Mussolini. In addition to this, its proximity to the larger New York metropolitan area made it an ideal location for Pan Am to begin operating their new transatlantic passenger air service. In 1934, the Port Washington Seaplane Base was purchased from the American Aeronautical Corporation by Pan Am. When purchased, it was described as state-of-the-art, with spotless hangar floors and glistening in fresh white paint. It sat on a spacious 12-acre parcel of land. The base had perfect access to Manhasset Bay and the Long Island Sound, both of which could be used for takeoffs and landings at almost any point on the 2,725 acres of water. There were virtually no obstructions. The purchase was also made at a convenient time, as transatlantic flight testing was occurring simultaneously at an Imperial Airways base in Foyers, Ireland. While LaGuardia Terminal was being constructed hastily, there was not enough time to wait until completion, so the purchase in Port Washington was made instead. With the acquisition of the base, Pan Am began to move in a more successful direction, and its history with Port Washington began. Such success would begin less than 1 year after acquiring land in the neighborhood known as Manhasset Isle, and Pan Am accomplished their goal of successfully executing the first ever commercial transatlantic flight. The location and base enabled experimentation, test flights, and production to happen, so the construction of the plane was rapid. Pilots were trained on location, learning how to take off and land on the expansive waters of the bay. Modifications enabling longer flights were made at the base on land. Trials were run, and if result expectations were not met, trials were run again. Finally, after a year of preparation, the historic flight took off on June 28, 1939, from the waters of Manhasset Bay, bound for Marseille, France. It was a momentous occasion for both Pan Am and the town of Port Washington. Some 5,000 spectators gathered on the shores of Manhasset Bay, while the Port Washington High School band played triumphant music for the occasion. 22 passengers walked down the base deck to board a Boeing S-55B, better known as the Yankee Clipper. The Yankee Clipper was a state-of-the-art amphibious flying machine, capable of traveling up to 3,500 miles with 10 crew and 74 passengers. The wings of the Clipper stretched an impressive 152 feet with a hull length of 106 feet. Even though it was a large plane, it still achieved a cruising speed of 183 miles per hour and a maximum speed of 199 miles per hour. This brought the length of the trip to Marseille to just over 30 hours. The interior of the plane was extravagant, with the Yankee Clipper sporting 7 luxury compartments, an exquisite honeymoon suite, and glamorous 14-passenger dining room. Because of the comfortable conditions, the price of a one-way ticket was $300 standard US dollars, with the round trip costing $675 standard US dollars. The luxurious nature of the flight aboard the Clipper-style planes would be a major advantage to the development of Pan Am. This lavishness would also bar out lower-class communities and make the service only available for wealthy elites. Now that Pan Am offered luxury flights across the Atlantic to other countries, the company was able to grow and profit greatly. A report filed by Pan Am the year before the launch of their new transatlantic service indicated an increase in potential revenue from new services such as a transatlantic passenger route. According to a profit chart organized by Pan Am, within a year of beginning operations, passenger and baggage revenue had taken over postal revenue as the majority of the profit the company was making. The total revenue of the company was only a little over $5 million in 1930, before the development of seaplanes that could traverse the Atlantic. However, by 1940, revenue had increased to almost $30 million. The total revenue of the company had grown 15%, or $10 million, from 1939 to 1940. This staggering increase can be attributed to transatlantic flight. The new revenue had also enabled Pan Am to order the construction of more planes and invest into future research and technological advancements into transatlantic flight. With the first flight across the Atlantic having taken place, the seemingly impossible task was now more achievable than ever for Pan Am. The flight taken by the Yankee Clipper was the start of many successful flights made by both Pan Am and other companies. While commercial flights along the France route had to cease during World War II, Pan Am still flew on. During the war, Pan Am oversaw the flight for the U.S. Air Transport Command and flew both mail and important people to the war effort. During active usage, the Yankee Clipper and her sister ships flew approximately 11 million miles, which is equivalent to circumnavigating the globe 440 times. The planes had traveled across the Atlantic an impressive 2,022 times, carrying around 80,000 passengers. With the age of flying boats coming to an end, the Clippers were gently retired and newer land-based aircraft were ushered into service. Despite the replacement of the seaplanes, Port Washington was still an integral part in the success of Pan Am. The strategic location of the bay proved to be crucial for both the development of new aeronautical technology and the advancement of long-distance aviation for many years to come. The accomplishment of the first transatlantic commercial flight and subsequent success of Pan American Airlines can both be credited to the capabilities of the Yankee Clipper. In turn, the development and improvements of the Yankee Clipper can be attributed to Manhasset Bay. With water sprawling for miles around, Port Washington provided the perfect location to facilitate transatlantic flight and bring about a new age for a budding company.